All right. Here we are. PBR Monday, number 5 for 2021. As always, if you want to weigh in and comment, go to streamyard.com/Facebook, give it your credentials, and that way, if you ask a question, I'll know who you are. We're going to go. This isn't going to be a full hour tonight, mainly because I have two kids upstairs that are watching the little dinosaur, and that ought to keep them occupied for maybe 45 minutes or so. So if I can get that far, I'll consider myself lucky. So just a few items that have come up this week. Today, I had a really interesting conversation with Brian Jablonski, a friend of mine who's the parts guy at Pocatello Power Sports. They're going to start carrying the Climb Adventure GTX boot. They like it as much as I do. I forgot that I had a set of Forma boots out in the shop, and I know some of y'all are rolling your eyes and going, how can you forget that you have a set of boots? But there's a lot of stuff out there that has popped up over the years, and I cleaned out my shop this week, and I discovered that, hey, yeah, I remember these. And I got to tell you, when you hold up that Forma boot side by side with that Adventure GTX, the Adventure GTX is way beefier. So it is as comfortable as the Forma boot is, but in my view anyway, it's much more protective. And I will, at some point, I'm going to take some pictures side by side, and you'll be able to sort of see for yourself. But anyway, PPS, they haven't gotten in the order yet, but they're going to start carrying that Adventure GTX boot. And in my view, if you're interested in buying a pair, you'd be supporting a great tour sponsor if you bought them from those guys. You can tell them about what your foot size in and, maybe have them waiting when you get it here. The other thing that's come up this week is I've seen some chatter about what to do about shuttles. There is a place on the forum where I've talked about shuttles in years past, but it's easy to look over that stuff when you're looking for 2021 stuff. There's nobody that runs a shuttle. I used to kind of do it, but a couple of things sort of put me off from doing it. One is that it's a long way to go. And, for me to come from Pocatello to go up there to get you and bring you back, it's, a 1,400-mile round trip. And I have better things to do. Not that spending an entire day with you all is not an absolute delight, but it's a day of riding, watching my kids, things like that I don't get to do. The other thing is I got burned several times when people would get halfway through the tour and they couldn't finish and they get pissed off. And one time I actually drove all the way up there and I got a text message when I was about 50 miles away from where I was supposed to meet these guys. And it was basically an F you, ha, ha, ha. So, I stay out of that stuff myself. However, there is a way that most teams have decided on, which seems to work just fine. If you're bound and determined, you got to have an actual shuttle. There are some people in town here, people I know that are reliable, that if you're willing to open your wallet wide enough, they'll drive your rig up there and meet you. That's not a problem. If something happens to you midway, if your bike explodes or you have a medical or something like that, someone in the tour community will probably help you out. We'll all get together and figure out a way to get you out of that. But just in terms of you riding a successful tour and getting to the end, the very best thing to do, the thing that makes it easiest on everybody, I think, including you, is there's several U-Haul places that are very close to the end of the route. Excuse me. Now, pardon me, the one that's in Priest River closed last year. Much to the chagrin of one team who had booked their U-Haul through the place in Priest River. But there's a place in Ponderay, which is only about 30 miles from Priest River. There's some places over in Washington. There's a place up in Sandpoint. There's places down in Coeur d'Alene. There are several U-Haul dealerships that are pretty close, excuse me, somewhere between a half an hour and a 45-minute ride from Priest River. What most teams have done, and this works fairly well, is just have a U-Haul reserve. Just reserve a U-Haul truck, throw your bikes in the back, and just drive it back down to Pocatello. There's a huge U-Haul place in Pocatello. There's kind of a hub. And, you can drive down to Malad, get your bikes, throw them in the back, then come back up and drop off the truck and do what you got to do. Or you can deliver the truck to Pocatello and then just ride your bikes back to Malad. It's not that far down the freeway. So what most people have decided is the best way to do is just shuttle yourself. Just rent a U-Haul up there north somewhere and drive it back down. And, when you get to Pocatello, if you're having a hard time getting back to Malad or something, get a hold of me and I'll help you with that. Same on, the first day you come down. If there's some issue, if you want to leave your rig in Pocatello instead of Malad, which I don't know why you'd want to do that because there's a great place in Malad to leave it. But if for some reason you need to do that, talk to me and I'll see what we can work out. So those are the two sort of items that I saw popping up in a little bit of chatter this week. I like that a lot. So let's just get into day 3 before my kids explode. Day 3 this year doesn't have a lot of changes over last year. I've got the map pulled up here. Day 3 is a really good day. It's the first day to me that really starts to feel like what I consider to be the Tour of Idaho. You're starting to get into the mountains in central Idaho, and the riding is not too difficult unless you do the challenge section or unless you do the 3-person variation of the challenge section. It's a lot of fun riding all day long. Now, it's a lot. It's close to 200 miles, and it's got some lengthy sections of single-track trail, but for the most part, they're fast and flowy, and they're not too difficult. The stuff around Sun Valley is awesome because the folks up there, I see Jeff Jensen's watching tonight. He and his posse up there do an outstanding job of taking care of these trails. They've got this whole Wood River Trails Coalition going on up there, and those guys are on fire. Those people take care of those trails. So they're generally sawed pretty early in the season. Sometimes they have to be sawed 2 or 3 times, so that's no guarantee that you're going to get there and there's not a tree down because the health of the forests in Idaho is not as good as it could be due to, changing climate, beetle kill, things like that. And so every time the wind blows, trees fall down in central Idaho. So the trail could have been sawed the day before, and you might still run into some issues. But those folks up there are outstanding at maintaining their trail network, and it shows. The trails are not crappy trails. They're wonderful trails. They're well-drained, so you're not riding up gullies and stuff like that after a rainstorm. It's pretty slick stuff. You're really going to enjoy it. There's a lookout that you're going to ride up to that's way up high. Wild Horse Lookout's close to 10,000 feet. Your first actual 10,000-foot place on the tour is just before Wild Horse Lookout up at the top of Corral Creek. And even early in the morning when you're riding mostly ATV trails and quad trails, it's a lot of fun. You go through some geology that's interesting, and it's just really pretty. And it has a real remote feel most of the day, too. But 50 miles in, there's gas and Mackey and food, and you can stop there. You're then going to hit Ketchum, hopefully around noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And then you're going to see my friend Kaylin Dennis at Smokey Bar Store somewhere around 5 or 6. Usually teams that aren't doing the 3-person route or the challenge section, they get into Smokey Bar Store sometime between 5 and 6. We shortened up day 3 specifically to get you to Kaylin as quickly as possible because Smokey Bar Store is one of the more outstanding places along the tour. It really is kind of what the Tour of Idaho is about. And Kaylin's one of our favorite people. She's just a splendid hostess. So we want you to spend as much time there as possible and be able to sort of decompress and relax and what's quintessentially an Idaho experience. So let's get into what happens. You're going to want to get going super early in the morning on day 3. And again, that's not because you're not going to make it until midnight if you don't. It's because you want to get to Smokey Bar Store early. I can't say this often enough. To me, that is one of the best tour experiences that you're going to have. And you want to maximize your time there. Kayla and them are going to hook you up with a nice meal. You're going to stay in a cool cabin. It's what we do is all about. So you're going to want to get there a little bit early. So get going early. I get going, 5 or 6 in the morning, crack of dawn. If something is wrong with your bike or if you need a part, there's a really good power sports dealer in Arco, Lost River Power Sports. You probably won't get there early enough the day before unless you got going super early in the morning. But they open, I think, at 8 o'clock. You can call ahead and find out. So you could, if you absolutely had to, and some teams have had to, you could get up early in the morning, go to Lost River Power Sports, buy what you need, a tire, whatever it is. get out of there, and you could still make it to Smoky Bar store reasonably early that day because it's not that long of a day for most riders. So right out of Arco, you're going to head out along some farm roads for a while, and you go up over something called Arco Pass. It's all Jeep roads, quad trails, things like that. There's nothing about it that's difficult at all. It's pretty fast. The riding is not dangerous. And then you're going to get down into Valley. It's the Little Pishimaroy Valley. Now, I talked a little bit a couple weeks ago about you got to use some sense when it comes to your right hand. I don't want to see anybody doing 80 miles an hour going down roads where you're likely to encounter other people. If you're way out in the middle of nowhere, I don't care. But last year, there were guys that were like really hauling ass going down residential streets. I can see it on your PLB. It gives me your speed. In this area, all of these trails are frequented by people on ATVs and UTVs. And if you're really going fast down one of these trails, you might come around a corner and end up as a hood ornament in somebody's big UTV. So I would recommend speeds somewhat less than reckless abandon. Even though it looks like you could really open it up in some of this stuff, just be careful. And also be aware of the fact that the speed limit everywhere is 35 miles an hour. So on all those roads, I know they're straight as an arrow in some places, you can see for a mile. And I'm not saying, don't open it up a little bit, but I wouldn't be doing 100 going down any of those roads if I were you, because if you get caught, you'll get thrown in jail, and you're not going to make up appreciable time going really fast like that, and nothing good's going to happen. Just kind of take it easy and relax when you hit some of those big transfer sections between trails. So you're going to go up, and the nominal route goes up something called Sands Canyon. There's a kind of a steep little climb not too far up, so we allow the soloist to bypass that and go around it. It's not anything that most people couldn't handle, but it's one of these steep, rocky little climbs that goes for about a quarter of a mile. And for a soloist on a loaded bike, it's just more than I want you to have to deal with first thing in the morning. So we send teams up there. The route again splits up on top, and there's a 3-person variation that goes down Van Dorn Canyon, which is beautiful. That's actually my favorite variation. And then there's the nominal variation that goes down the canyon right next to it. They both end up at Deer Creek Bar. Sort of all the variations join up again near 3D XYZ 20. Then there's some seasonal closures that affect this stuff. All that's in the route description. As long as you're there before, I think this year it's September 9th, you're fine. But after September 9th, some of the stuff starts closing. So that's why there's a lot of variations in this area, so that you can get around stuff after the seasonal closures kick in. So all of you are going to, at this point, go up towards, Wet Creek Basin. And it's really beautiful up there. At one point, you're actually zigzagging across what is a humongous avalanche path that slides every once in a while. And you'll recognize it because you'll keep crossing this place where there are no trees. And it's a genuine, real-life, humongous avalanche chute. You get up into Wet Creek Basin, you come down into something called Mud Lake, and then you have an opportunity to do a bonus section, your first bonus section of the day. Once you come down past Mud Lake, if you want to, when you hit Pass Creek Road, instead of going south, you can turn north, go up to Pass Creek Summit, and there's a little loop that we have for you. It goes around Warren Mountain, and it comes down Bear Creek Lake. That's kind of a cool loop. It's a one-way loop. You've got to do it counterclockwise. Clockwise would be really hard. Counterclockwise is not hard at all. Here's the only thing that I'd say about that. That's not a bad bonus point to check up if you're there early enough, because you have time that day. It's an easy loop if it is sod. And that trail doesn't get ridden very often, and generally I or people that I know are the only people that saw it early in the season. It might get sawed in the middle of August sometime when trail crews finally get around to it. But that's one that if it's not sawed, you might run into some trouble. And because of its sort of semi-one-way nature, the trees are always down near the bottom. Up at the top, you're not going to have any problem. But you ride down this really steep hill, When you get to the bottom of the hill and you start down a creek, that's where all the trees are always down. So if you get down in there and it's not sod, you're going to have all of a sudden a problem maybe getting back up the trail. So you might want to wait for some beta on whether or not that trail's been sawed. We have a spreadsheet that we'll start putting up in June that gives the progress of trails that have been sawed. And just pay attention to that, and if you see it's been sawed, then there's a pretty good chance you could probably get through it. Let's see. Question on challenge points like Wet Creek Basin. The CP guide has Wet Creek Basin near 3D XYZ 26. Do we just take our best guess when we get there? And Jeff just answered the question. You'll know it when you see the view. Every time it says near this waypoint, there's an obvious place. I mean, when you get there, you're going to go, oh, yeah, this is why he put the challenge point right here. So there won't be any doubt about it. Sometimes it's right on the waypoint, but sometimes it says the scenic view or something near this waypoint. When you get there, you're going to understand what it is. There won't be any ambiguity about that. So at any rate, one way or the other, you're eventually going to go south down Pass Creek Road. And again, this is another one where speed limit is 35 miles an hour. There's cows all over the place, and I guarantee you there's people in Jeeps, ATVs, UTVs, hikers, people on horses. There's all kinds of people that use that road. So don't go blasting down that road 85 miles an hour doing full power slides through all the corners. You're going to have a problem. There's a good chance, anyway, that you'll have a problem if you do that. And in that area, that's frequently patrolled. You might end up in the Hooskow. So you go down to 3D XYZ 29. You are going to turn to the rider's right, which is due west. And you're basically going to go to Mackay, Idaho. Mackay is a very cool little town. There's great places there to eat. And, have breakfast there if you want to. You got some time. Now, don't be spending an hour. But, you could probably afford to spend 20 minutes, a half an hour there, getting yourself some water, get a nice breakfast, fill up your bike, and then hop on it for things are starting to get really good portion of the tour. You're going to head up. You're going to do part of the Mackay Mine Tour. It's an area that's really, really popular with Jeepers and people in UTVs especially. And you're going to climb up a great big long hillside with some really cool views, and you're starting to get up into the White Knob Mountains. Up near the top, you're going to hit a road. It's the Alder Creek Road, and you're going to turn northwest on that Alder Creek Road at 3D XYZ 36. You don't want to go up Mammoth Canyon. Right at 3D XYZ 37, there's a turnoff, and unless you're just really hauling ash, you'll see it. The only time people ever blast past it is if they're really hauling up the road. But at 3D XYZ 37, there's a road that crosses a little creek there, and that's the one you want to take. And it goes up Stewart Canyon and down Corral Creek. And up around 3D XYZ 40 is your first 10,000-foot point. I think you're at 10,200 feet when you get up there. Now, once again, this is a place where those who disdain quad trails is trivial. Why'd you put these quad trails on here? Well, for one reason, there's just not single track everywhere we want to go. If there were, that would be what was on there. But for you all out there going, quad trails are beneath me, wait until you get a hold of this one. I've seen good riders struggle in some of the switchbacks on this quad trail because they're steep. They're all washed out, lots of loose rock, and you basically have to pick a good line and get on it. But I have actually ridden people's bikes over that were really good riders. There wasn't anything wrong with their riding ability, but it's up there at altitude. You're going to start feeling it. If you're really laboring to muscle the bikes through those switchbacks, you're going to feel it because all the hard work's right up around 10,000 feet. Anyway, you're going to come down out of there into Corral Creek, and that's going to drop you down the Burma Road. You take the Burma Road a little bit, and you come down into Copper Basin. And 3D XYZ 44 is the waypoint where you hit the main drag through Copper Basin. You're going to get on that road. And once again, the same sort of a proviso applies. Don't haul ass down that road. Ride a reasonable speed. I'm not going to fuss at you for, doing 55 or 60 or something when you can see where you're going, but don't be doing 100 going down any of these roads. It doesn't make any sense. You're heading generally west as you go down that Copper Basin Road. And when you get near the end, you're going to do an out and back up to a lookout, Wild Horse Lookout. Wild Horse Lookout is spectacular. Again, for those of you who disdain quad trails, wait until you get a load of the quad trail that takes you up to Wild Horse Lookout. And it in the beginning, it's completely trivial. And it's really pleasant where it's completely trivial. You're going to like it. The views are really good. But up at the top, that turns into like a 5-10 quad trail. It's got some gnarl to it, and there's a little bit of exposure up there. And, you might, depending on what kind of conditions it's in, when you get up there, you might have your hands full. I see that Brett and Jeff and let's see who else is on here. I know that's done it. Jeff's on here. Jeff, and Brent are all on here. You guys can weigh in. I mean, you've all been up there. I think probably you might have something to say about this, but I think some of these quad trails are as exciting as some of the single tracks sometime, and the views are really good. But anyway, you do this out and back up to Wild Horse. You come back down. You're going to head due south, and you're heading up a road that eventually dead ends. It goes up to, I forget what it's called. I think maybe Wild Horse Mine is at the end of it. There's a guard station up there, but you're going to cut off pretty early, and you're going to do the Burnt Aspen Creek Trail. Burnt Aspen is most people's idea of one of the highlights of the tour. It is a beautiful trail. It's technically very trivial. One switchback that you may have to muscle a bike through. But other than that, it's completely awesome. It takes you up to one of the postcard views of the tour of Idaho. Then you go down something called Cane Creek, which is just as scenic. When you get to the bottom, it's a little gnarly. It's just a lot of trees, and it's kind of in a creek bottom a little bit. But, on a scale to 5, these are all super easy trails, and you're going to love them. Hey, there you go, Mike Knight's videos. Mike Knight has the best videos, not disparaging anyone else that shot video of the tour, but his videos are at another level. They're really, really good, and I recommend them to you. Tour veteran from last year. But anyway, this Burnt Aspen Cane Creek stuff is just fantastic. And by the way, Jeff Stoss and his partner Ken and S also have incredibly good videos. Those guys have very thoroughly documented their tour experiences as well, so I recommend you to those two sets of videos. Anyway, you're going to come down traveling generally to the west. You're going to hit Trail Creek Road at some point. Trail Creek Road is a big, you can drive when it's all plowed and it's ready to go in the summer. You can drive a big RV over it if you need to. But it's kind of a cool road, and it drops you down into Ketchum and the Sun Valley area. Now, Ketchum and Sun Valley, is a pretty good-sized little place, but they don't have a good power sports store there. There's a place down in Haley, but that's mostly a UTV store, and we're trying to work on that. There are a Cherbys, their headquarters is there. There are some people there that we're trying to work out a deal with where, maybe they could be a tour stop or something, but I don't know how long it's going to take to make that happen. For the time being, there's auto parts stores and places like that in Ketchum, but there's no place that you can get really motorcycle-specific stuff. And it's not worth going down to Haley because those guys won't help you out. They won't even stock anything for you. So Ketchum's a good place to have lunch, but don't stay there too long because you're not that far from the end of your day if you get going. And I would say be out of Ketchum by 2 o'clock in the afternoon latest. Don't dwell there any longer than that. Once you get out of Ketchum, you are going to ride out Warm Springs Road. And again, this is another one of those kind of places where you got to be careful because there are a bazillion people. I've seen a Lamborghini coming down that road before. It's mostly dirt, but you might come around a corner and see a Hummer with spinners on it. I've seen a Lamborghini, I swear to God. You're in Glitter Gulch, so there's no telling what's going on up there. There's hot springs, and you'll see people bathing in the buff and the hot springs and stuff like that. It's kind of crazy. My point is that road is well traveled, so watch yourself going down it. But you're going to go about 10 or 15 miles down that road, and you're going to hit waypoint 3D XYZ 65, and that's Warfield Creek. And that's where you get into these really, really, really good single-track trails that are going to take you in the Smoky Bar Store. Now, every year there's some concern about the creek crossing there. The creek crossing where you get off the road there at 3DXYZ 65, I recommend getting off your bike and walking up and down that creek a little way and seeing if you can see a better place to cross than where it looks like you should cross. That creek crossing can be quite deep and the water flows really fast. And it turns out that if you walk down the bank a little way, you'll see on the other side, you can't see it on the side you're on, but on the other side of the creek, you'll see a place where a bunch of people have come out. And it's pretty obvious. And I always get down there and just get off my bike and I walk up and down the creek a little bit and I scout it out a little bit. You know, that stuff changes a little bit from year to year. But find a place where there aren't any big holes and where it looks like you can kind of get across. The wider it is, the shallower it's going to be. If it's a real narrow place and the water's running really fast, watch out because there might be a hole or there's certainly going to be fast-flowing water there. But that's nearly swallowed some people whole. So you got to be a little careful there, and you might want to consider pushing across that. You get across that, you go up Warfield Creek, and you connect with Red Warrior after a few miles. And basically, you wander around some ridge tops that are south of Warm Springs Road. Once you get to 3DXYZ, 69, routes kind of diverge there. And there's basically, you have sort of three options. If you're on a 2 or 3 person team and you don't want to do the challenge section, you're going to head south. Soloists head north a little bit. There's just a slightly shorter variation for soloists. If you want to do the challenge section, you follow the solo route to 3DX8 and then go over to 3C1 and you're on your way. I don't recommend this challenge section. It's kind of longish, and the difficulty is mostly at the end, and this one has swallowed some people up, including me. There's a really nasty section down at the bottom of the creek that you're going down there that it's got a bunch of boulders. You're riding through the creek, and there's boulders and holes and stuff. And half the people I know have drowned a bike in that area. The boulders are big and slick, and you got to hit them with some speed and ride over them. There's actually some side hilling down there, too, that freaks a lot of people out. And that's even before you get to Big Smoky Creek. That's just in the little creek that takes you to Big Smoky. Once you get to Big Smoky, you got about a half a dozen creek crossings, and some of them can be quite deep. So that's a challenge section I would skip. If you're on a 3 person team, you've got to do part of it, but you don't have to do the whole thing. Everybody else, unless you're on the challenge section, everybody is going to end up near Dollarhide Summit. And up there at 3DXYZ 72, is that right? No, it's at 71. 71, it's really easy to miss the way down to the road. Years ago, that trail used to go on out, and there was a different way down to the road, but that doesn't exist anymore. A fire came through there and burned some stuff up, washed some things out. So there's been a new bypass that's been cut down off of there. It's super easy to miss the route that you're supposed to take down to the road and end up on this big knoll that goes nowhere. And I know people that have ridden back and forth a dozen times looking for the way down the hill. That waypoint is exactly where it needs to be, and that's another one that I suggest that you verify carefully. Study the aerial photos and make sure that you know where it is. But the waypoint literally sits right where the trail goes off down the hill, and it's not obvious from the saddle of the bike there's actually a trail there. It's in the middle of a short uphill section, but if you have any doubt, just stop your bike there. It's not steep enough that you can't stop your bike, but just stop your bike, get off and walk around, and you'll see it. It's off to the rider's right. It's very short. It dumps you right down onto the road at Dollarhide Summit. You're going to ride down a ways, and at the bottom of the hill, at 3D XYZ 73, you're going to hit this thing called Big Peak Trail. I think it's 016. One of the best trails of the entire tour. It's a single track trail that is completely casual and completely beautiful. Now, if you are on a 2 or 3 person team, you just ride that all the way down to Little Smoky Creek, and then it's about a mile from where the trail comes out in the dirt road to Smoky Bar Store. You should be there somewhere between 4 and 6. If you're on a 3 person team, we make you go down and ride the bottom part of Big Peak Creek, which is the hardest part of it. It's not as long as doing the whole challenge section, and it's the challenge section. Part of the challenge is finding your way up at the top. It's not completely obvious, so you have to do a little bit of navigation. At the bottom, you're not going to have any trouble navigating because it's pretty obvious where you need to go, but you're just going to be scratching your head going, I can't believe the trail goes there. But those of you that are on 3 person teams, that's just a little wrinkle that we throw at you to keep the playing field level. Once you get into Smoky Creek, there's a high and a low trail. It doesn't matter to me which one you take. I just stay on what looks like the most obvious trail, and if you do that, you're going to be just fine. You'll see all kinds of tire tracks and stuff like that. You get the ride to Skiller and Side Hill, which is pretty exciting, but you shouldn't have any trouble finding it. But if you get lost and you get on the wrong trail there, the 2 trails parallel each other. I'm not going to ding anybody for that. So anyway, at some point, you're going to get into Smoky Bar Store. And when you get to Smoky Bar Store, my friend Kaylin's going to be waiting for you. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. What's the weather like up there right now?
Well, the sun came out long enough just to get a sunburn, and now it's snowing.
It's doing the same here, believe it or not. At least it is at 5,000 feet. But welcome to Idaho, right? Springtime in Idaho.
Right.
So, Kaylin, tell everybody what to expect when they show up at your store. Tell them basically what's going to happen the night they're there.
Well, if you tell me ahead of time what kind of beer you drink, I'll bring one out to you when you pull up. But whatever time you get there is when dinner hits the oven, and we'll have it ready for you, and your cabin will be ready for you, and a hot shower, whatever else you may need. We have quite a collection of bike parts and tire parts and stuff like that now, but if you need something extra, just let me know.
Yeah, we hooked Kaylin up with some stuff. She's able to call a lot of people in the industry and get a few things. So Kaylin is more than glad to help you out with some things, but you also have to remember you cannot mail things to her yourself. If she can get them, that's fine, but you can't mail a package of tires or a package of motor oil or anything like that to her. That violates the rules. But she does have some stuff that might be useful for you. She's got some oil and some things like that. So you can call her and find out what she's got. And if you call her in advance, and it's something that's not too out of the ordinary, she might be able to hook you up. And I understand you can buy gas cans there that might actually have some fuel in them. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. That's not something we can advertise too much, but you might be able to buy a gas can that it's used. It's got a little leftover fuel in it. I think that's the best way to put it.
Right.
So I'm going to try to get up there as soon as the road's clear and everything. I'm going to load the whole family unit in the RV, and we're going to come up and visit one weekend. Because I haven't seen you. We didn't see each other last year at all, did we?
Nope, not at all.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I'll bring my kids up, and after you spend 2 days with them, you'll never want to see me again.
Oh, I don't think so. So the road to the store is scheduled to be open May 1st. They have to plow over Couch Summit to get there. So we're just patiently waiting. I'm really good at that.
Yeah, but they finally got the road to Featherville open, didn't they?
Yeah, last Labor Day, they finally punched it all the way through to Featherville.
Good deal. Good deal. Well, Kaylin, is there anything else you want to tell everybody here?
I don't think so.
This is your moment. Kaylin gets on my case because she says you always put me on the spot. And I was even going to set her up tonight with a joke, but I decided it would make her nervous.
Bad idea, Martin.
Well, okay. What happens when people show up covered in bear spray at your store? Do you have any special provisions for that?
Well, when that happens, you get special treatment. And yeah, you get to sleep outside next to the fire.
Do they have like a volunteer fire department at Featherville that you could call to like hose people like that off? Like give them the whole 200 PSI out of the hose?
There's a Forest Service fire station less than a mile up the road from us. So if that ever happens again, we'll be sure and have the engine come down and spray them off before they get in bed.
Yeah. By the way, that did happen, but I really like the people it happened to. But you know what? Stuff happens, man. I hear all this chatter and stuff like that. And when you sprayed yourself with bear spray, I don't know what you think about this, Kaylin, but I think that's legendary kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah. You can't make that stuff up.
You cannot make that stuff up. All right, Kaylin, thanks for joining us tonight for a few minutes. And as soon as the road gets open and I can get my ducks lined up, we'll come up and pay you a visit, okay?
Anytime, Martin.
All right. Thanks, Kaylin.
Okay. See you later.
So there you go. Special guest tonight, Kaylin Dennis, who, again, I cannot tell you enough how stoked we were when we were first able to work out a deal with Kaylin to get her on there. I've been riding up there for years, and I'd never really been to her store because it was always closed when I rode by. I'm one of these kind of ornery cantankerous people that just doesn't like to ride where other people are riding. So those trails up there are fairly well used in the summer, especially in the weekends. So I usually go up there in the fall and on weekdays and ride all that stuff. And I don't see anybody if I do that, which is what I like. So I missed her and missed her and missed her. And then a couple years ago, some of the Sun Valley crew and some of the folks at Climb started saying, you really need to get to know this lady. And I'm really glad that they encouraged me to do that because it made the tour twice as good as it was before we put Smokey Bar Store on there. Enough said. So let's see what we got in terms of questions here. Not seeing a lot. So I'll take questions if anybody has any. Otherwise, I'm going to go upstairs and see if my kids are still alive. Day 3 is a fun day. Can't think of anything that I need to warn you about except for the one creek crossing down there, getting on the Warfield Creek Trail. Watch that one a little bit. Day 3 is the first time water crossings kind of start becoming a problem, and that's there's a lot written on the website and on Motorcycle Jazz in general about creek crossings and how they can be more hazardous than you think. I get off and push across those things generally, unless it's like if it's over axle high, I usually get off and push across. Another example of the Climb Adventure GTX boot, or another advantage of it, if you're wearing that, you're not going to get your feet wet when you push across those creeks. But it's one of those kind of things where, the pushing across generally doesn't take, what's it take, 30 seconds, a minute more than riding across it would have. But what happens if you lay your bike down that creek? Well, your gear's probably soaked. Unless you've got giant loop bags, they're pretty watertight. But in most bags, if you lay your bike down in a creek, stuff's inside your bag's going to get wet. If you suck water into your intake somehow, then you're there for at least an hour trying to get everything cleaned out. And if you're on Hondas and Yamahas and things like that where the transmission vent is vulnerable to water getting in it, then you're going to have milkshake in your clutch. So when you consider what can go wrong and weigh that against, being the cool guy just trying to blast across this creek, it's always made sense to me to push across most of those things. The other thing you need to be aware of is those things are always deeper than they appear to be. It's a refractory effect. It's an optical illusion. And that effect is especially intense when the light's coming in at an angle. Around midday, it's going to look closer to the right depth than it will be in the afternoon and in the morning. But it's really easy to come up on something that you think is 6 inches deep that's actually 3 feet deep, and that's a refractory effect. It's a well-known effect, in fact. Okay, what's the next gas stop after Smoky Bar? So that'll be the next morning, and it's about 30 miles away. It's up at, what's the name of that place? Jeff, what's the first gas stop? What's the name of that store? It's 30 miles into day 4, and the name of the store is escaping me right now. Smiley Creek, that's it. So Smiley Creek is your first gas on day 4. So you could probably make it to Smiley Creek, but, you might as well start out with some fresh gas. What else? Big Smoky Creek should almost always be walked, especially early. Rocks are treacherous and slippery. JJ, amen, brother. That's exactly right. I think I have hauled water out of the pistons on my bike a couple of times in mishaps in Smoky Creek. We have anybody else? All right. Well, day 3 was kind of a short day, so it makes sense that this is a short broadcast. We'll probably get this in 45 minutes tonight. Next week, we won't, because day 4 is a much more complex day. It's a long day. It's got some complexities to it, and we'll talk about that an awful lot. So we'll go the full hour next week. I've got some more equipment stuff I'll bring in, and I'll sort of monitor the forums, and if I see any chatter that comes up or if people PM me with questions and concerns, I'll bring that up as well. I've told you before that we are going to start moving things from good parking for camper that's halfway, baby. Dude, you cannot have a camper halfway. You can't have any help anywhere along the way. If you interact with anybody that you know, your girlfriend, your wife, your riding buddies, or anything like that, once you leave Malad, it's a DQ. So that's not a good question to be asking. You cannot have help anywhere along the way. If one of your former teammates drops out of the tour, they can't just ride the roads around and join you at night. There's some teams that asked about that last year. That's a DQ. You have to do this on your own. You can't have any help along the way. So please don't put me in the position of having to DQ you when I find out that you had friends waiting for you at Smoky Bar Store in Chalice or something like that. Oh, for afterwards. Hell, I don't know. Chalice, Salmon, any of those places. So anyway, I was talking about moving things over to the forum. And I noticed that an awful lot of people are attempting to register for the forum. And I tried using all of the automatic things, all the automatic tools that the forum software gives to screen out bots. And they're pretty good at it, but they're not perfect. So what I've decided that I'm going to have to do, because I've accidentally admitted some bots. And the first thing that happens is, there's activity in the forum that I don't want. From now on, and it actually asks you to do this. If you read the section, please read this before you register. It asks you to supply some information. So in addition to your name, the more information that you give me, the more I'm convinced that you're not a bot, that it's a real person trying to register. You could upload an avatar picture if you want to, upload a picture of you and your motorcycle, but in those fields, when you register, there's all kinds of information that you can give. You can give your date of birth. You can give the city that you're in and stuff like that. I don't need anything too personal. I don't need your social security number or driver's license. I don't even really need your date of birth if you don't want to. But there's all kinds of fields there that you can fill in that if you do, I'm convinced that you're actually a real person and not a bot. And I'll look at that stuff some more and start telling people that, look, these are the things, the fields that I want you to fill out. That way I know it's a real person, not a bot trying to register for the forum. But I saw last night I went in there and looked, and there were 10 people that had tried to register. At a couple places, I Googled up the emails, and I could see that was actually a real person. They had an online presence. But in some cases, the emails looked a little suspicious. I checked the IPs. One of them was obviously, it was on stop forum spam, so I didn't admit that person. But a couple of them, I just really couldn't find any online trace. There's not a lot of information there. I don't admit people like that because I don't want to expose everybody in the forum to any kind of malicious activity. So the more information that you can provide for me, the quicker that you're going to get admitted to the forum. I do all that stuff about once a week. Every week I sit down and because it takes about a half an hour to go through them all and try to check them out. So the more information you give, the easier it is for me. Somebody also asked about calendars and stuff like that. I mentioned this a few weeks ago. This year I'm going to wait until the time for registering for the 2020 tour is passed. So it's June 1st. As soon as June 1st gets here, probably that evening, I'll have the calendar up. That way I just have to go through that calendar one time. If I do it right now, what'll happen is people go in and change their dates and do things like that. Then I have to go back and change the calendar. It's been a real mess every year I've done that. So what I want to do this year is buy once, cry once. I want to spend a full day going through it just one time, and then I'll ask everybody to take a look and make sure it looks right, and then if it is, we're good to go. You have to register by June 1st if you want to be considered a contender for a jersey number. So if you want to do a T1, T2, you can do anytime you want. You can change your date if you need to. So just lock in a date, and then if you need to change it later on, that's just fine. I don't have a problem doing that. But what I'm not going to do is somebody that says, pings me on June 15th and says, hey, I just found out about this site and I want to register for the tour. Can't happen. You got to wait till the next year. And there's plenty of good reasons for that. So the calendar, I'll update June 1st, and I'll start putting up that trails sod list too. Every year, tour people go out. I check the IDPR website. Those guys are really helpful, good folks. Make sure you buy an Idaho Trail sticker because you're supporting those guys. If you do that, I'll try to have some of them on to talk about that. But when you buy that Idaho Trail sticker, that 85% of that money goes straight back into the trails. So you're actually paying the salary of the guys that go out with saws and clear and maintain these trails for us. Oh, God, more whining. Water was crotch deep. Wah, 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 wah. All right, that's it, everybody. Hey, Carrie, how's the hip doing? I didn't know that you had a problem until I was looking at your social media the other day, and it sounds like that you're on crutches for a while. You okay? Guess there's a lag here. Carrie Barton, first woman to complete the tour of Idaho on a team called the Holy Rollers, which put the boots to it a couple years ago. Sprayed themselves with bear spray, but that's okay. Carrie, I guess, is down a little bit right now. I saw on her social media the other day that she'd had some minor work doing on her hip. There she is, and yeah, I'm doing good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. All right, that's it for the night. Thanks for spending, better part of an hour now with me. I got to get upstairs and make sure my kids are still alive. So next week will be D4 and other various and sundry topics that I come up with. Thanks again. Really appreciate your time, and be seeing you.